Thank you, Madam Speaker. I am delighted to rise today sur le projet de loi pour une réforme du système d'asile équilibré, le projet de loi C11. This bill and related reforms would reinforce Canada's humanitarian tradition as a place of refuge for victims of persecution and torture, while improving our asylum system to ensure that it is balanced, fast, and fair. The bill would ensure faster protection of bona fide refugees, would reinforce procedural fairness by implementing a robust refugee appeals division at the IRB, and would ensure faster removal of those who seek to abuse Canada's generosity by making asylum claims. Madam Speaker, Canada has always been a place of refuge for victims of persecution, warfare, and oppression. English Canada was founded by refugees fleeing the American Revolution, the United Empire Loyalists. Canada was the North Star in the Underground Railroad for escaped slaves from the southern United States. In 1956, Canada welcomed some 40,000 refugees of Soviet communism fleeing the invasion of Budapest. In 1979 and 1980, Canadian churches and families welcomed some 50,000 Vietnamese Indochinese boat people, creating the magnificent foundations of our private-sponsored refugee program. Having said that, there have been moments that when we turned our backs on those most urgently in need of our help. We think, of course, of the example of the European Jewish refugees during the Second World War, who Canada refused to accept, detailed in the great historical work, None is Too Many, written by Harold Troper and Irving Abella. We must learn from the mistakes of that period so that we never repeat them. And I believe, Madam Speaker, that we have learned from those mistakes, because Canada has welcomed some 1 million refugees to begin a new start here in Canada in security and with our protection since the Second World War. Now, Madam Speaker, there remain an estimated 10.5 million refugees, according to the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, around the world. Every year, some 20 developed democracies resettle about 100,000 refugees, and from that number, Canada annually resettles between 10 and 12,000, or 1 out of every 10 refugees resettled globally, second only to the United States with 10 times of our population. Madam Speaker, the government is also active with our international partners to help those in need. Take, for example, the government's commitment to resettle up to 5,000 Bhutanese refugees from Nepal, this over several years. We have already welcomed over 850 Bhutanese refugees in several communities across Canada. In addition, we've also completed the resettlement of over 3,900 Karens from Thailand. And I was very proud last year, Madam Speaker, to announce a special program to welcome to Canada over the course of 3 years some 12,000 refugees from the conflict in Iraq. I visited some of these families. I visited some of these families in Damascus, Syria, last May, Madam Speaker, and I must say I still remain touched and deeply moved by hearing their stories of violence, of persecution, often on religious grounds. And Madam Speaker, everywhere I go across the country, I encourage community groups, church groups, faith groups, and others to participate in our privately sponsored refugee program to help rescue those Iraqi refugees and other people in need of our support around the world. In addition to all of those things, Madam Speaker, we have increased our support for the UNHCR in their important work to help displaced populations on the ground. In fact, to quote Abraham, the UNHCR representative to Canada, Canada, he said, quote, is a major resettlement country and a major donor to UNHCR activities worldwide, and has for the first time in its funding of UNHCR's global operations worldwide reached a new level of over $51 million, making this the highest ever annual Canadian grant to the UN Refugee Agency, close quotes. Madam Speaker, I'm proud that that happened under this government. In spite of our many achievements, Madam Speaker, I believe that in the context of balanced reform to our refugee system, Canada can and should do more to help those in need of our protection. And that's why, as part of this broader package of reform to our refugee systems, including our asylum system, I've announced our intention to increase the number of resettled refugees welcomed to Canada by 2,500 individuals to 14,000. We would continue to lead the world and set an example for other countries, Madam Speaker. I propose that in the context of refugee reform, that we increase by some 20% or $9 million the Refugee Assistance Program, going to provide initial assistance for the successful integration of government-assisted refugees typically coming from UN camps. I have also announced as part of these increases in targets an increase of some 2,000 positions for people to come through the very effective privately sponsored refugee program. Now, Madam Speaker, bizarrely, these huge increases in Canada's generosity that I announced was criticized by one individual claiming to speak on behalf of refugee organizations, demonstrating that there are some in this debate who are neither objective nor balanced in their approach. But I must say I was gratified to see the overwhelmingly positive response from those who actually work with refugees, not just issue press releases, but actually do the practical work with people who need a new start. Now, for example, Mr. Abraham of the UNHCR said, quotes, "This is an encouraging move in the right direction that yet again demonstrates the humanitarian commitment of Canada to provide protection to needy refugees from whom resettlement is the only solution, enabling them to rebuild their shattered lives with respect and dignity." Mr. Chai of the Canadian World Relief said he expressed his sincere appreciation and deep gratitude for your announcement to increase the PSR target to 6,500 annual level. And a coalition of sponsorship agreement holders, groups that bring new refugees to Canada, said that they were, quotes, "thrilled with the news." Now, Madam Speaker, there can be no doubt that this government is committed to continuing Canada's proud humanitarian tradition of protecting those in need. But let me turn my attention to the asylum system. We also have, as all members will know, a very robust and highly regarded and extraordinarily fair charter-compliant legal system for the consideration of asylum claims made by refugee claimants arriving in Canada. Unfortunately, the system has many serious, long-standing problems, and everyone knows it. I'd like to credit the member for Vaughan, the official opposition immigration critic, for having raised this issue as early as 18 months ago and doing so in a nonpartisan fashion. I'd also like to commend the Leader of the Opposition for having pointed to the problems in our asylum system which must be addressed. Now, one of the problems, Madam Speaker, is that we have had very large backlogs in asylum claims as a permanent feature of the system. The average size of the asylum backlog in our system over the past 10 or 15 years has been 40,000 people waiting for a hearing on their application for asylum protection in Canada. That means typically people have waited about a year to get even a hearing. Now, right now, it's as high as the backlog is as high as 60,000 a decision or a hearing on their application. Meaning, Madam Speaker, that people have to wait 19 months for a hearing. This is not acceptable. We must do better. If someone manages to escape one of Ahmadinejad's prisons in Iran and he arrives at one of our airports with the scars of torture fresh on his back, we don't offer him a quick pathway to security and protection in Canada. We give him a form and say that we'll check back with him in 19 months. That's not good enough, Madam Speaker. And those who defend the status quo, those who say these permanent, huge backlogs, those who say that, frankly, the large number of false claims which contribute enormously to those backlogs are acceptable, those who defend the status quo, Madam Speaker, frankly, have taken the wrong position, I believe, with respect to our moral obligation to provide speedy protection to those in need of it. Now, Madam Speaker, the truth is this: too many people try to use our asylum system as a backdoor to gain entry into Canada, rather than wait patiently to come here through the immigration process. The result is that too many people abuse our system in an effort to jump the immigration queue. There are a number of problems with the current system which encourage unfounded claims. Now, how do I make this assessment that there are many unfounded claims? Well, Madam Speaker, in the last 2 years, we have seen some 58% of the claims for asylum made in Canada subsequently deemed to be unfounded or not in need of our protection. Many of those claims are actually withdrawn by the claimants. I'll give you one example. I suspect if we went to any of our constituencies and asked people what they think is the most likely source of refugee claims in Canada, they might say Iran or North Korea or Somalia or Iraq. Well, in point of fact, Mr. Speaker, it's an EU democracy. Hungary, last year, 2,500 claims from that year. Subsequently, 97% of claimants from that European democracy went on to withdraw or abandon their own claims, indicating to us that they don't need our protection. Now, why they came and went through the asylum system is a good question.